Okay, raise your hand if you like musicals, but either do not live in New York City and or do not have the time, money, or capacity to watch your favorite musicals over and over in the same way you would rewatch your favorite TV shows and movies or reread your favorite books. That's me, for sure. And I think there may be other people out there like me. If not, we're all just screaming into the void anyway, so what's the difference? Now, caveat, don't smoke. It's bad for you. It causes cancer. But if musicals were like smoking a cigarette, I am here to provide you today with a nicotine patch in the form of books that remind me of my favorite musicals. I'm going to walk you through some of the best musicals in my opinion, and I'm going to tell you which books have the same vibes as them, or which books I think if you like the musical, you would also like the book. And then that way, even if you can't get to the theater, even if you can't drop hundreds of dollars every weekend to watch a show again or watch a new show, you can still get the vibe in some capacity with the book version. That is what I'm here to give you today. But before we do that, I am gonna sit because I'm done with my standing energy. It's happening. We gotta do this one. Hamilton.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Everyone's heard about it. If you don't know what Hamilton is or you don't know the general premise, genuinely I'm impressed because it was everywhere for like 4 full years. And if you managed to not watch it or see it or hear anything about it, I would love to know what you've been doing with your time. Maybe you were a child. 10-second summary of Hamilton. It follows Alexander Hamilton, a founding father who we didn't really know that much about before the musical came out. No one really talked about him. You know from the beginning of the musical that he's going to die when Aaron Burr, a previous friend, shoots him and kills him. And you don't know why that happens, and over the course of the musical you understand the relationship more and more, and you see all of the things that Alexander Hamilton did in his life and how his work impacts us and impacts the people around him. And then also some of the mistakes he made and all that jazz. Okay, when I was thinking about what book to read if you would like Hamilton, I was thinking about the fact that they managed to create suspense and intrigue, even though this is all history that technically we know, and even though they tell you at the very beginning of the musical how Alexander Hamilton is going to die. Despite knowing a lot of the information, you still feel propelled the entire time, and you still learn so much during the process. For that reason, I chose 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. This book follows a woman who is a prostitute, and we're following her in the 10 minutes and 38 seconds after she has been killed, and her brain is still kind of active and going through some moments in her life. So we're flashing kind of back through her life, seeing how she got to the point that she did, but she's dead, and we know that she's dead from the beginning of the book. And despite the fact that you know she's dead, you still mourn her loss and you still appreciate her life as you see it panned back. And similarly to Hamilton, where you're seeing the lives that he touched and the choices that he made, it's the same thing with the protagonist of 10 minutes 38 seconds, where you see the lives that she touched and how she became the person that she is in that time. There's a lot I don't remember about this book, but I feel like it's a testament to it that I read it probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I still to this day think about it as one of the best books that I've ever read. So our next musical is Mean Girls.
It's fine to flirt.
That movie/musical/movie musical has had a lot of iterations in its day. I would posit that the movie and the musical are both excellent in different ways, and that the movie musical is kind of just worse than both of them. I wouldn't recommend it over either the original movie or the musical, but I guess it sort of scratches the itch. Although if you want something that is a bit different and so it doesn't feel like a bit of a letdown compared to what you were expecting from either the musical or the movie, I would recommend reading The Bandit Queens by Parni Shroff. The Bandit Queens follows a group of women living in this village in India, and the protagonist of the book is a woman named Geeta, whose husband has kind of mysteriously disappeared, and everyone in the town thinks that she killed him because he was abusive and just hid the murder and the body really well. In reality, she didn't kill him, she has no idea where he's gone, but has gained this reputation in the town of having killed her husband. But a lot of the other women in the town are unhappy in their marriages and are not treated well by their husbands, and so they start coming to her, asking her for help, killing off their husbands because they feel like she's successfully killed off hers without getting caught. So this book has a lot of the kind of hijinks and female rage and competitiveness and hysteria in a very funny, women-centered way that I think Mean Girls also has. I think of Mean Girls as a powerful subversion of the trope of the girl gets a makeover rom-com, suddenly she's beautiful and incredible to everybody. Instead, it's this encapsulation of female rage. And I think the Bandit Queens has that same energy and manages to have the same sense of female dynamics and how close friendships can be, while also how toxic they can be and how mean women can be to each other, but also just how powerful and manic and incredible women can be in kind of the most terrifying way. For that reason, both the Bandit Queens and Mean Girls feel like the same font to me, if that makes sense. Speaking of musicals that got turned into not as good movie musicals, Dear Evan Hansen.
Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned.
Oh my god, that show is incredible. I have still never seen it. I desperately want to, but I haven't seen the movie musical because I, to be honest, haven't heard a lot of good things about it. The fact that it came out and then I heard nothing good about it makes me think you shouldn't watch it. Instead, you should read Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. Heaven follows these two teenagers who go to school together and are both horrifically bullied by their peers. And then one day, one of them leaves a note for the other one saying basically we should meet up and become friends. And it's about this friendship that is formed through just the absolute trauma that both of them go through in school. And so much of this book is just about the trauma that these two poor children face, but also about how there's power in having that community with each other and having somebody understand you and care about you and see you even with all your faults and all the things that you hate about yourself. Similarly with Dear Evan Hansen, it follows Evan Hansen, a boy who feels really alone and is really horribly bullied by this kid in their school named Connor Murphy. But then Connor Murphy commits suicide and happens to have a letter that Evan Hansen had written to himself with him when that happens, but it looks then like Evan and Connor were actually friends this entire time. And Evan ends up sort of inserting himself into Connor Murphy's death and Connor Murphy's family because he finds a place where he's being listened to and he belongs and he can have a place and not feel so lonely and sad. But then everything kind of spirals out of control because it's unhinged from the beginning. It's an unbelievable thing to do. What the hell are you doing? Both Heaven and Dear Evan Hansen have this undercurrent of how being alone is so destructive and hard, and how having any sense of community can just immediately make you feel so much stronger and safer, even if very little else in your life changes. I mean, this really is the era of movie musicals, because the next one I'm going to talk about is Wicked, and the movie musical for that one, at least the first half of it, is coming out soon.
You'll be with me.
Now, I have no idea whether or not that one's going to be good. I do have hope for it still, although I'm worried about the fact that they seem to insist on marketing movie musicals as just movies with some background music that sounds like it could be kind of musical theater-y. But listen, we'll see. I'm definitely going to hold out. I'm not going to pass judgment until I know. But until it comes out, until I can watch it, I'm not going to go watch Wicked on Broadway. Instead, here's what I'm going to do. I'll tell you. I would read Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. I own this one. Yay! Oh my god, I get to point to a real book. That's crazy. We live in a time where I own a book. Okay, Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. This book is, it wasn't my favorite book of all time, but I did enjoy the reading process. It follows a woman named Harriet and her daughter, Perdita, and Harriet is from a country called Druhasrana, but moved from Druhasrana to England, where her and Perdita now live. Except the entire book, it's not necessarily clear whether Druhasrana is real. There's also this kind of magical realism component of it where it ties in a lot of different fairy tale elements, such as the story of Hansel and Gretel, and Harriet and Perdita make this magic gingerbread that sort of changes people's lives. And the book follows Perdita learning more about Harriet's childhood and how Harriet came to be. Now, Wicked, if you don't know, follows two main protagonists, Glinda the Good Witch and Elphaba, who are paired together as roommates at this sort of wizard school that they go to, and everyone thinks of Elphaba as being wicked and evil because she's green, but in reality she's actually quite a good person. And Glinda, meanwhile, is pretty shallow and vain, but people think of her as being very good. But the two first meet and really hate each other and don't get along, but then form this really beautiful friendship and go through a lot together over the course of Wicked. Now, similarly, one of the core components of Gingerbread is a friendship between Harriet and Gretel, who is Harriet's long-lost good friend from Dhruhashtrana, who Perdita is now going to find. And so I think that sort of central component of female friendship, but there's something wrong there, there's something rotten, something has gone amiss, is similar between Wicked and Gingerbread, and the fact that both of them have fairy tale aspects woven in. They're not exactly the same, they're not going to give you the same vibe, but they exist in a similar space in my brain. I think this next one might be my most controversial take, because in my mind they work perfectly together, but I could also see how in a very real sense they don't make any sense together at all, and that is the musical Newsies with the book Babel by R.F. Kuang. Newsies is based on a real historical strike. It follows a group of newspaper delivery boys in New York City in the early 1900s, and basically their entire life is just poverty, and they have each other as kind of a found family, but they don't make very much money. They aren't treated well by the companies. If anything goes wrong, that comes out of their wages. There really isn't any sort of workers' protection there at all, and they end up going on strike. This is a real thing that happened, but the musical follows this strike and the leader of the strike and the journalist who's writing about the strike as they try to fight for fair wages and fair hours and fair pay for these newspaper delivery boys. This brings our Jeremy Jordan counter to 1. In fact, Newsies is also available to watch the recording of the actual musical on Disney+, so you don't even really need a nicotine patch for this one. You can just smoke your cigarette away. But in case you want something that's, same but a little bit different, I feel like Babel makes sense. Hear me out. Babel is a dark academia fantasy that follows a young boy named Robin who's taken from his home in China and brought to Europe, to Oxford, because this world has a magic system that relies on translating words from one language into another. And if you speak that language natively, there's more power when you translate those words, and there's more energy to be harnessed, basically. And the whole book is an allegory for colonialism and how colonizer countries came in and took goods and people away from the countries that they colonized, and how it propped them up to be more successful and better and tore down these other countries and these other groups of people. I feel like you can see where I'm going with this. Both Babel and Newsies have these themes of classism and inequality and historical unfairness. They're both kind of based on historically real things that happened, but with their own twist. And both of them are surrounding words. They might not have the exact same vibe, I'll warn you on that front, but I think they have very similar themes and they exist in similar spaces. Up next, we've got Hadestown.
I'm coming, wait for me. I hear the walls repeating.
This is a musical that you should watch if you want to feel like your insides are being scooped out with a melon baller and then put back in, but in the wrong place. It's just so powerfully sad and beautiful and well written and well produced, and everything about it comes together in such an incredible way. But I've only been able to see it once and I want it again, and so what do I do to scratch that itch? I'll tell you what. You read Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now this one seems very obvious to me because Hadestown follows the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is a Greek myth about a man whose wife basically dies suddenly, and then he goes down to the underworld to try to get her back. But in this time with sort of an industrial revolution, and the underworld is this coal mine creating energy, and so there's this kind of capitalist, dark, climate change tilt to it. But at its core is a story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Song of Achilles follows, spoiler alert, Achilles and Patroclus, who are two good friends who go into army training together, I want to say. It's been a minute since I read it, but it's based on the story of Achilles, who's a famous warrior in Greek mythology. But the Song of Achilles tells the story of Achilles from a different perspective and doesn't focus on Achilles as a powerful warrior. Instead, it focuses on his relationship with Patroclus and how close the two are and how much love they have for one another, both as boys and friends and as they get older. Both Hadestown and the Song of Achilles are Greek myth retellings that are tragedies. Despite knowing how it's going to end from the beginning of entering it, you are still surprised at how bereft and heartbroken you can feel by the end. And I think both tell really quiet, beautiful, powerful love stories. Folks, I've got some good news for you. We've reached Jeremy Jordan once again. He's the protagonist in Newsies, and he is also the famous Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby musical.
Of a tiny little cottage at a tiny little table filled with tiny finger sandwiches. Drown me in the bay.
I'm not going to recommend Great Gatsby as the book you should read if you like the musical, because that is too obvious and you could figure that one out on your own. Instead, I'm going to tell you to read River East, River West by... You know, I should look up the authors before I record these things. I'm going to say her name is Aubrey Lee. My computer's too far away, I'm not going to Google it. River East, River West is about a girl who has her entire life had a single mother, lives in China, but her mother is white, but her father is Asian. She doesn't know who her father is, and has always been poor, but by the fact that she is half white and has an American citizenship, has this power that others resent her for. And then her mom marries this rich Chinese businessman, and suddenly she's getting sent to this fancy new school and meets all of these people who live in Shanghai, I believe, but are, you know, fully Caucasian. Their parents just live there for business. And so it's kind of this dynamic of the protagonist splitting these two different classes and wanting to fit in both within the Chinese culture, but then also wanting to feel American and wanting to feel a part of that culture as well, despite the fact that she, I believe, has never been to America. The book follows both this young girl, but then also her new stepfather, and we see his life and how he got to be where he is and what he's had to sacrifice and what he's done. Yeah, I think the classism, this idea of a gilded age or a seemingly golden age that actually has a lot of cracks underneath, exists both in The Great Gatsby and River East, River West, which is why I think it would scratch a certain kind of itch. This one I feel is randomly both very popular and very niche, and that is Merrily We Roll Along.
Hey, old friend.
If you don't normally travel in musical theater circles, you might have heard of it because Daniel Radcliffe is one of the stars, and it follows from back to front this friendship dynamic between this group of three close friends. And they just do such a good job of portraying the changing dynamics of their friendship as they go from being broke college students all in relatively the same place in life to having certain levels of success, some having more than others, and then certain parts of their lives falling apart. But since you're watching it from back to front, so you're watching it from the present into the past, you know how things are, but you don't know why. And uncovering what happened is so satisfying and interesting. And in general, it's just about how friendship changes as you get older and how you can lose friends if you don't fight to remain who you are, even as your surroundings change, and what it means to outgrow someone versus lose yourself and therefore lose touch with people who really truly knew you but don't anymore. Now, this one feels almost as on the nose for me as trying to recommend The Great Gatsby for The Great Gatsby, but it's different, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Daisy Jones and the Six is told as if it's an interview between a bunch of members of this group, Daisy Jones and the Six, who at one point was extremely popular, but sort of disappeared after the peak of their popularity, and people don't know why. Now, similarly to Merrily We Roll Along, it's about this group of friends and this group of people who were once very close, and the forces that bring them together and push them apart, and how people can be changed so much by different surroundings. And it's just about fame and success and power and love, in the same way that Merrily We Roll Along is also about all those things, just from a different perspective. And both follow people who make music together. And also, if you end up liking Daisy Jones and the Six, there's a TV show that I quite like that you can watch. And therefore, it's like nicotine gum on top of the nicotine patch, if you want the Merrily We Roll Along vibes. Oh my God, those are all the recommendations. Oh Lord. That was a good time. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry if you don't care about musicals. Sorry if you don't care about books. What am I apologizing to you for? I don't know. I'm Anisha, by the way. I realize that I never say my name in any of these videos, and maybe that's like a good thing from a privacy perspective, but you know what my home looks like, you know what my face looks like. If you want to kill me, you're gonna kill me, you know what I'm saying? So hi, but also bye, because this is the end of the video, and I will see you next time.